Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey, where we talk about everything you need to know to be a killer at sales. I'm your host, Will Jenkins. Let's get it.
Today's episode is brought to you by Revinova. Revinova solves the transportation management challenges facing 3PLs, freight brokers, carriers, and shippers with multimodal TMS solutions powered by the #1 CRM platform, Salesforce.com. Serving the logistics industry since 2014, Revinova TMS customers benefit from increased sales velocity, improved service quality, higher employee productivity, and lower IT costs. Hello. Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey. My name is Will Jenkins, and I'll be your host, CEO, and founder of Journey. Today, we have Mike Beckwith, VP of Brokerage at Freight Plus. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Man, so crazy enough, you just reminded me that we go super far back to the Coyote days.
Yeah, about to say I probably met you 8-9 years ago whenever Access America got purchased by Coyote.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. It's crazy to think there are so many people that have gone through either of those organizations and are at the vice president level and building businesses and going to do a thing, man. A lot of talent coming through those two businesses over time.
Absolutely. It's awesome to see a lot of your colleagues going out and building better businesses out there. And it's been great to watch.
It's the best. It's a lot of fun, man. So, well, appreciate you being here today. As we go ahead and get started, I would love to just have you tell us like a quick 10,000 foot overview of your background before we dive into some of your sales topics.
Yeah. So, as you said earlier, I'm the vice president of Brokerage today, but, I think like most people in the industry, I got here by accident. I was serving tables and bartending at a local spot in Chattanooga and, had a beer with the right guy at the right time that was looking for someone that just had the right mindset, had the right hustle. And he was like, you want a career in logistics? You ever thought about that? And I remember going back to the back of the kitchen and asking Siri, Siri, what is logistics? Because I had no idea. I didn't go to school for it. I actually wound up dropping out of college after a couple of years and, got my first gig at Access America Transport, learning the ropes, learning cold calling and sales. It was a cradle to grave environment. And, as you know, Coyote bought us about a year after my time there. And then it spiraled into UPS. And, by the time I left Coyote after a 7-year tenure, I was overseeing 3 or 4 offices in the Southeast area. And, most recently I jumped to another company to help as a director of sales build up a Chattanooga branch, managing a few of their offices. And then my current stints, shipped up to Boston to help Freight Plus, who's a managed trans provider historically that's been, growing like a bad weed, and they didn't have the brokerage services. They didn't have that transactional solution for their clients. And so, now today I'm over sales operations and client success for that division of the business.
Man, that's awesome. I got a chance to get a little bit acquainted with Steve a few months back, just learn a little bit more about Freight Plus. You all have a very unique offering. So it's cool to see what you're able to build out and the services that you all can provide. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, I think my favorite thing about the team is just how diverse the group is. Steve particularly comes from an Amazon background. And, as you know, from that behemoth of a company, they've got certain ways of doing things that help them grow tremendously. And so we're, seeing some of those practices brought in, just a fresh perspective on how to grow a business, mixed with a bunch of really great people from the freight industry now. I mean, it's one of the strongest leadership groups I've had the pleasure of working with. And it's been a really cool experience so far.
That's awesome, man. So as we get started here, I always love to start with a fun fact. So what you got for us? Yeah.
So this is a weird one for me, but so as I said, I'm a college dropout, right? Went to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga for a couple of years. Didn't really know what I was there for, and just wound up getting into the working world in the food industry. And my career's taken me a lot of places, but one of the weirdest ones that it has taken me is having that same university reach back out to me and ask me to be an instructor at their supply chain academy that they were building up for the local area. So yeah, it was, to not have a college degree, then to get to, teach at the same college I had dropped out of. That's probably one of my favorite fun facts, because you don't hear about that happening too often. I was really blessed to have that opportunity and get to do that. I had a natural calling to teaching. My grandfather was a professor at Clemson, so it was something I wanted to try out naturally. So, but that was a really cool experience to get to do that for a couple years.
Awesome, Mike. Well, appreciate you being here, man. We're going to go ahead and dive in. We'll talk about selling solutions, not service. So consulting versus pitching. You have an interesting offering at Freight Plus, very comprehensive, lots of things that you all can do for customers. So got to take a consultative approach to that. Talk to me a little bit about how you teach sellers to go from pitching to being more consultative.
Yeah. So, the first and foremost, the big thing about sales that I always make sure to come across is that authenticity piece. I think we've all experienced this once in our life, either with purchasing a car or that door-to-door salesman that shows up at our house and they're immediately pitching you. They're immediately telling you like, hey, I've got the best knives on the planet when you're buying Cutco knives, or maybe that vacuum salesman, whatever it may be.
Hey, hold on. I grew up selling Cutco. I feel personally attacked. Stop playing with me.
Did they give you a pitch?
Listen, here's the deal. I did that. I started 18. I sold Cutco for 4 years. My first 10 days, I sold $10,000 worth of Cutco. Those are the best knives in the world. I will die on that hill. 100%. 100%.
I will say I've been sold.
But listen, I'm going to have to go downstairs and get the scissors right now and start cutting some pennies. Stop playing with me, Mike. Those things are for real. It's a real deal. Oh, my gosh.
You did it better than anyone then. They kind of train you on a pitch. When I sold insurance for a little bit before I got into the freight world, they give you a phone script, right? You got to say, it's the whole, this is how you build value in the conversation. And in the freight world, you got to rethink that a little bit. Like, yes, 100%. You got to have your elevator pitch down. You got to be able to articulate what makes your business different. What makes you stand out from the other 50 brokers that might be calling that one customer in a day. But that really starts with you as the individual, finding an authentic way to be able to start the conversation, to be able to build rapport, and then get into just asking questions. When we're talking to our junior sellers, they think that sales means you talk the entire time. They think that dominating the conversation is what a good sales pitch sounds like. And I'm explaining to them, you need to shut up and sell. Okay. And what I mean by that is ask a question and then sit there and be quiet and be comfortable in that silence, because the customer's thinking about how to answer the question. They're going to come in and articulate an answer to that question. And if you got somebody good on the phone that really wants to engage in that space, like that next question, as long as you keep it open-ended, you'll have a 30-minute conversation blank, right? And you'll have something of real meat and value. And that customer felt like they had a really good conversation with somebody that they can trust and take further down to the next steps.
Man, you just dropped so many sales bites. I was trying to take notes as quick as I could, but a couple of things that I think are interesting that maybe are counterintuitive to how people sell is freight is unfortunately such a commoditized industry that it's really hard to take a blanket out of a book sales approach and say, do this and people will buy, right? Hey, start here. And then after that, you deliver some insights. Then after that, you ask them what keeps them up at night. Framework items are helpful in a discovery call, right? You got to do some frameworks. But the way I look at sales personally in freight is like Goosebumps books when you were a kid and you read the book and it says, hey, if you take the left path, you go to page 77. And if you take the right path, you go to page 100. Because I don't know what happened that day. They could have failed on 7 loads because a carrier gave them back. And so now they're just hot and they don't want to talk to me. And so this is just, we got to go where this call is going. Doesn't really matter what I might have had planned or like my consultative report. They don't care about that today, right? And they also are inundated with so many calls and emails that it's almost impossible to differentiate yourself. But the only thing that is different is you. Like you are one of one. And so it's hard to teach that in a book. Like, how do you find your voice in a sales model? Like, freight is just such a unique selling freight to shippers and getting opportunity. It's just such a unique sales process.
Oh yeah. I mean, even when you look at, a lot of the junior sellers will say, what do you say every call? What do you do every call? And it's like, they're never the same. I mean, that's the brilliance of the freight industry is never one day is the same. I've been doing this for over a decade. I can't say I've ever had the same day twice. No. It just doesn't happen that way. And that's what you're going to find with cold calling too. And so I always tell them, like, you want to have a list of open-ended questions that you think are valuable, but part of that's doing your research, right? And part of that's being just yourself. I mean, one of the best pitches I saw one of my sellers use recently was actually buying the customer's product, taking a selfie with it, making a joke of it a little bit of like, hey, I wish I was helping move this to my house, and like that kind of stuff. And that genuine approach, that different way of kind of just getting away from the pitch and just finding a different way to connect with the individual, and it was funny enough, it was a company that sold seafood, and they were just like, he made a pun at the end of it. It's like, I'm really hooked on your product. I wish you'd be hooked on our services as well. And the customer was like, that just made my day. I'll take your meeting. Let's have a meeting next week and see what we can do together. So let's go ahead and get that locked up, man. Sometimes just being a person makes a big difference. And I've seen reps do the same thing, man. Take a video of them reviewing a product that they just bought at the grocery store, and that customer was ghosting them up to that point. And then boom, they're like, all right, nobody's ever done that. Like, sure, I'll talk to you. So you got to play the game, thinking outside the box. Yeah. So question for you. You mentioned consultative versus pitching. So how do new sales reps get to the point where they understand how to ask consultative questions versus I'm the best broker, our service is incredible, we'll never give loads back, right? Everybody says that. But how does a new person learn how to ask good consultative questions to then be a strategic seller versus, just pitching? Yeah. So I look at it, the difference between selling service and creating value. And what I mean by that is you never want to pitch a service or a solution really until the end of a discovery call with the client. So, in a setting like you and I are here today, you get on a Teams call with your client, you're having a face-to-face interaction, you're asking questions pretty much nonstop, or at least the way we train is you ask questions, right? You get to know the person, you get to know the business. And then when they start to answer these questions for you, they're going to tell you things that are going to be light bulbs in the back of your head, right? Like, we have a problem with knowing where these trucks are at. We're having issues with tracking. We're having, dock congestion. We're running out of space in our warehouse. And like, for some, like, space in the warehouse, right? That's a drop trailer solution in my head, right? So the next thing, when we get at the end of this, is really the recap. I think is such an important piece of that consultative approach, right? You want to articulate what the customer said to you to show that active listening skill. So if they said, hey, if I heard you right, you were talking about one of the areas that you're struggled with is space in your warehouse. Have you considered a drop trailer solution program? What, have you ever tried to implement that with someone before? Do you have the parking space for it? Just leaving it open-ended, and boom, they're like, sometimes yes, sometimes no. You might find some meat on the bone there to really kind of chew into, and then you get to really get into the value proposition of your business and saying, we work directly with carrier partners to really support drop trailer solutions to run a more efficient model and to give you more space at your site to be able to get some of that product out of the warehouse and maybe store it in a trailer for 24 hours so you can more fluidly get product moving in and out. So to me, that's really how you build that conversation is again, shut up, ask the questions, and let the customer talk. And then at the end of it, that's when you start to really take in those little tidbits that they said. I usually write down the word that I think is a little bit buzzy, if you will. And then just articulate that, like, if I heard you correctly, and make sure they hear that, because they want, essentially, a little kiss the ring thing, if you will.
You got to play the game.
out of respect for you, I want to make sure for clarity, checking, they call it checking, right? Is the actual terminology from a skill set standpoint is checking with the client, making sure that what you wrote down or what notes you have are confirmed. And that is what the customer was alluding to. And then you can add your little tidbit of value and saying, well, that, our company has a solution for this, right? And focusing more on ROI driven solutions for the client. Again, you saying I'm a 3PL, you saying I'm a broker, I've got trucks in your area, they've heard it, it doesn't drive ROI, right? But if you address specific things that the customer is telling you during that conversation, again, limiting freight spend, maybe warehouse space, maybe it's issues with transit times if you're dealing with like produce type commodities. Those types of things are really what the customer cares about and really wants you to pick up on and talk to.
100%. I think the biggest thing you mentioned there is just asking questions and then confirming alignment, because it's tough to know what to sell on if you haven't asked enough questions for them to tell you about what it's like in their world. So you may have a plan of how you're going to position all these cool services that you provide, and you start asking some questions and they tell you about something that you didn't even consider, but that is the hot item. And for you to onboard them, you need to figure out how to solve that problem. It doesn't matter about your reefer capacity and it doesn't matter your warehouse solution. They might say, man, we're running this project and we don't have enough power only capacity. And we keep getting behind schedule for this new rollout because of that. Be quiet. Now it's time to listen and ask questions about that. It doesn't matter what else you came in. Like, that's it. So the best sellers are good at that. When you're new, it's a little tougher.
Yeah. You try to, it's funny when I'm talking to new sellers, I always relate it to, you're trying to pick someone up in public, right? Like if you're a male, you're approaching, someone of interest at a bar, you're buying them a drink. If you're eager, if you come off too eager, you come off too excited, they're going to be turned off by that, right? Like, you got to give them something to chase a little bit. You got to play it cool. You got to ease back into it. It's the same thing with sales. It's the same thing with building relationships, right? You got to take a little bit of extra time to really tailor the approach, if you will, and to tailor the solution.
Man, that's how you win, man. So I took some great notes on this. I want to recap here real quick, make sure I heard what you said. I want to check for alignment here. And then, and if there's anything that I missed, let me know. So the first thing you mentioned was to be authentic, which, man, love that. You got to be yourself, really figure out what makes you different as a person. What's your style? Sales does not mean talk the entire time. Very important. We're here to listen, ask some questions. You mentioned selling service versus creating value. So I think that's something a lot of times brand new people have a hard time with, building that value, because they just want to pitch. We're the biggest, bestest, fastest. We're incredible. Like, it's not very valuable. Everybody says stuff like that. You also mentioned waiting until the end of the call before you really dig into your value proposition. So you're earning your stripes there throughout that call, asking the right questions to know what your value prop should be, because you might have a standard value prop, but it may not align with the pain points that you uncovered. And so now you got to tweak it to fit with what they're saying as a challenge. Have to ask questions. And then, as we just did here, recap, articulate, hey, if I'm hearing you correctly, here's the things that, and roll from there. So anything that I missed?
The last thing I'll leave you with here, and it's something I didn't really get to really talk about, was when you're focusing on more of a consultative approach, you're approaching it from the lens of a partner, not a service provider, right? And I think that's what really customers are buying, is someone that's going to stick with them long term, become an incumbent relationship for them. It's really about that long-term relationship. At the end of the day, you want to position your company as an extension of their company, not just a service, not just a transactional one-off relationship. And that's so incredibly important to make sure that when you talk about the lingo of the industry, this is really the lingo of sales, right? We're not just talking about, how are you spot quoting this? It's talking about, what does this look like for you yearly? Are these volatile for you? What is this? Sometimes logistics managers dealing with their own sales teams, if you will, they're selling into different grocery stores or different retailers, and there's unexpected turbulence with their workload, right? So talking about what that looks like for them long term really frames the conversation around a long term partnership. You don't want to ask these short-term questions. You want to ask things that are, what happens a year from now, 3 years from now? What does that look like for you? What's the vision of that supply chain strategy?
Yeah, man. Well, Mike, thank you for dropping some incredible sales bites. We got to have you back on. This was really insightful. So thank you for the time.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Would love to do it.
Awesome, man. Thanks.